Most people know James Doohan as Scotty, the miracle-working engineer from Star Trek. But before he ever touched a fictional transporter, he was a real Canadian soldier, landing under fire on D-Day. In this video, we'll follow his journey from Vancouver to Juno Beach to the bridge of the Enterprise, and see how one man could cheat death in Normandy and then quietly change the future of science fiction. If you've only seen him rerouting power to the warp engines, James Doohan's real story will surprise you. Born in Vancouver in 1920, raised in Ontario, he wasn't destined for Hollywood. At 19, he enlisted in the Royal Canadian Artillery, eventually becoming a lieutenant in the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division's 14th Field Artillery Regiment. He even trained as a pilot, flying tiny Taylorcraft Oster planes to spot artillery targets. He later joked that acting was nothing compared to landing a little plane in a British farmer's field at 60 miles an hour. This is where our story really begins. By the early 1942, Doohan was in uniform, training hard. As a young artillery officer, he learned how to direct deadly accurate fire in support of infantry on the ground. But he was also curious and fearless. He qualified as a pilot, climbing into fabric and wood aircraft to fly low over the British countryside and wartime training grounds, hunting for good vantage points and safe landing spots. He'd later joke that landing one of those little planes in a British farmer's field at 60 miles an hour was scarier than anything he faced on a soundstage in Hollywood. For Doohan, risk, precision, and calm under pressure were already part of the job long before Starfleet existed. All of that training led to one day, June 6, 1944, D-Day. Doohan's unit was assigned to Juno Beach, the Canadian landing zone in the Allied invasion of Normandy. Juno was brutally defended, lined with mined obstacles and narrow channels under overlapping machine gun fire. Doohan landed near Courseulles-sur-Mer with some of the first Canadian waves. As the ramps dropped, he and his men sprinted across open sand, dodging machine gun fire and navigating through channels cleared between mines and obstacles. Under that chaos, his job was to bring order, to direct the artillery that would silence the German positions pounding the beach. Somehow, he made it off the sand. Through the day, Doohan directed his artillery gunners as Canadian troops fought through brutal resistance. At one point, he crossed a field they believed was mined. Later, he called it, quote, "the best walk I ever took." By nightfall, the Canadians had pushed further inland than any other Allied force on D-Day. The cost was high, but they had cracked one of the hardest beaches of the invasion. For Doohan, it might have seemed like the worst was over. But danger was still everywhere. That night, while returning to his position, Doohan was mistaken for an enemy in the darkness. A nervous Canadian sentry fired a burst from a Bren gun. Doohan was hit 6 times. 4 rounds smashed into his left leg. One tore through the middle finger of his right hand, an injury he would later hide on screen as Scotty. Another hit him in the chest. That one should have killed him. Instead, the bullet struck a metal cigarette case in his pocket, slowing it just enough to save his life. Years later, he joked that it was, quote, "the best cigarette I never smoked." Doohan spent months in hospital recovering, and he never fully regained the use of that hand. Still, he went back to duty later in the war. Like so many Canadian veterans, he finished his service quietly and then went home to build an entirely different life. After the war, he returned to Canada and used his veterans' benefits to study acting. That decision would quietly reshape pop culture. Stage work led to radio and television, and eventually to a low-budget science fiction series in the 1960s. On that show, James Doohan created Montgomery Scott, the Enterprise's chief engineer, and one of the most beloved characters in science fiction. On the Enterprise, Doohan poured creativity into Scotty. He crafted a Scottish accent inspired by a taxi driver he'd once met. He improvised the kind of fast-talking, half-plausible engineering jargon that became Star Trek's trademark technobabble. He even helped choose many of the show's iconic engineering terms. To generations of viewers, he was the miracle worker who could always coax a little more power from the engines. What's remarkable is how many real engineers he inspired. NASA recruits and students in STEM fields would later tell him, and others, that Scotty made them want to build things, solve problems, and push technology forward. For them, a fictional Canadian engineer on a starship was proof that calm competence could save the day. Yet, despite the conventions and the fame, James Doohan stayed humble. To him, his time as a soldier on Juno Beach was never about heroics. It was about doing his duty, surviving, and then using his second chance to bring something positive into the world. James Doohan's story is a Canadian story. Courage at Normandy, quiet service afterward, and a lifetime of under-recognized contributions. He began as one of thousands of Canadians who fought and bled on Juno Beach, and ended as an engineer who inspired generations. If you'd like more deep dives into hidden wartime stories behind pop culture icons, subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments who we should cover next.